All right. So, hello again. I'm Daniel. This is the talk Percona Monitoring Management PMM 2.6. A focus on security threat tool, which is a new pretty cool feature. Introduction has been made. My partner in crime is Steve. I'm Daniel. So let's get in business. So we're talking the security threat tool. What's that? Security. Security, it's like one of the most important things and probably one of the most ignored things. Which I shouldn't say that, but it is what it is. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve around security and databases and and all this stuff? Well, several things we're trying to solve. The first one is lack of visibility. Some of the problems of security are just because they're not visible. They're buried under noise. With more big, complex infrastructure topologies, deployments, it's more easier to lose visibility on security problems. That's one thing. Other thing that we're trying to solve is everything that comes around security issues because of operational mistakes. For example, lack of hardening protocols. It's pretty common that a DBA or DevOps or whatever deploys a database and nobody does a hardening. What's the hardening? Checking for anonymous users, users with a password, that the ports that needs to be open, nothing else. All the stuff usually forgotten. What else? Excessive confidence. Excessive confidence is believing that the database that you're using, the product that you're using, it's secure by default and it's secure out of the box. And that's not the reality. The reality is different. The reality is that the databases, probably the focus is more on usability, and usability and security are a complex balance, and sometimes usability wins, especially when you're using things out of the box. That's excessive confidence on the database. The distraction of unlikely scenarios. What that means? Focusing on complex solutions or complex or specific layers for security, like focusing only on firewalls, IP tables, security on load balancer, or things that are more complicated than and forgetting the basic stuff, the user password, the plugin authentication plugin and stuff like that. That's something else that we want to bring focus on when trying to solve this problem. Finally, is raising awareness. Like I say, things that are just buried under noise or under complexity or whatever, we want that to go to the front again. We want that to be the things that are going to be solved and have some love from a security perspective. So that's the why we need to fix how we are trying to solve that issue. First thing, and I think the baseline of this approach is start simple. The majority of the database breach security problems are because someone forgot to just put a password on a new user, or someone just left a user open to the world instead of specific IPs or specific hosts. That is problems that are super simple to fix, but probably someone forgot to do it or it wasn't visible. So we want to start simple. we want to be consistent. We want that the security check, it's applied and it happens on every single machine on every time at the same time. It's not something that it's only for the master or for a couple of nodes. No, it's something that it will work for every database that you have. Even if you have multiple databases, like, you know, PMM, you can monitor not only MySQL, you can monitor MySQL, proxy, Postgres, Mongo, DBAS. For all of those, if you have a mix of that, you will have the same check every time. Another thing is that it has to be continuously adaptable. New threats coming, the way to figure out that threat is you're being a victim of a threat or not change. We need to be we need to provide a solution that can adapt to that. Next is that you don't have to be an expert on the DB on the database. You don't have to be like this super senior DBA or a manager of the database to have access to security report, right? So that's something else that we want to put as a requirement. Things just need to work. Also, this needs to be useful. It has to be something that it's easy to highlight. The security threat tool needs to be something reliable that I go and it actually saying to me what is the problem, and it's not the info is not buried on noise or whatever. That's something that needs to have. It has to be actionable. You not only need to know that you have a problem and you have a security issue, but it also provide to you means to fix that problem, right? Information how to actually change the password or links to more complete documentation on how to fix it. It has to be actionable. It's just not only an alert and then you have to figure out how to fix it. No, it will have you how to fix it. And finally, it has to support bring your own scripts. What that means? It needs to be customizable. There are particular situations on every single deployment. It's not the same your deployment than mine, and there are things that are more a security issue for you. You need to be able to create custom checks and for that using our tool. So that's our approach to solving now. What's the result? How we solve it is the security threat tool. So Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Well, I mean, as anybody in development knows, always the list of things that you want is greater than we could ever hope to do in a lifetime. So we had to dial it back a little bit, and we set out sort of a series of development goals for the team on what were the things that we must do in this first release. So those things are drawing attention to issues immediately. Again, that goes back to the requirement to be actionable. Maintaining a consistent view so that you can gather all your information in one spot. I think that's one of the beauties of PMM has been putting all this information in one dashboard or in one spot that you can get all your information. We needed to have the out-of-the-box functionality that can check for and alert on the most common issues. We also wanted to get some more like virus definition style updates so that the security checks as they were developed didn't require a separate action of you installing and upgrading your PMM system. Once you have the basic engine, we can add checks in our cloud service and you pull them down on a nightly basis. For making these checks, we wanted to be a simple language. We chose something that was Python based. And the whole goal for that is being able to open this up to allow you to create your own custom checks. And ultimately, our number one goal is really, helping you stay off the front page of the internet. So, we set those out as the initial wave of goals. There's plenty more to come and we'll get into that. But right now, I think we're gonna hop out of this presentation And we're gonna go over to demo mode. So Daniel, just kind of give me a nod if that's showing all right.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead.
Excellent, excellent. So what you're looking at here is the home page of the PMM tool. If you've never seen it before, there's an awful lot going on, but for those of you who already have it, this is probably the first thing that you notice. So this is an upgraded system. Obviously, it's a demo system. You know, I guess you could log into the IP if you're really so inclined. But the point being, when you first install the latest version, you're going to see the failed security checks panel, but you're going to notice that it is disabled. We did this intentionally. We wanted you to have to proactively go to our PMM settings page, either through the PMM dropdown or the convenient link provided right here. And what that's going to let you do is actually toggle the security threat tool on. Now, there's a reason for this. One of the things Percona holds highest regard is your data, your privacy, and being able to control that information. One of the things that we do is telemetry is enabled by default in PMM. What this does is sends us very basic information about the PMM server that you're running, simply the version, what type, is it a Docker image, is it an AMI, is it an OVF file, and how long that's been up, and that's it. You can get more information on that if you go to check.percona.com, which is the endpoint that the telemetry service hits. But when you enable security threat tool, you're going to notice that you can no longer disable telemetry. And the reason for that is eventually, and we'll be very transparent about this, but eventually we'll need more information so that we can go from simply informing you to actually helping you make better decisions, more qualified decisions. And I'll show what I mean after we apply this. So I've turned this on. This is a demo environment. I'm actually running this instance in debug mode. For the end user, when you enable security threat tool, you're going to kick off a whole bunch of behind the scenes processes, one of which being going out to our cloud service, pulling down the latest checks. That's going to run once every 24 hours. So depending on when you last started your PMM instance, that's what starts the 24-hour timer. You may not see anything for, literally the next day. But when you come back to the system, you'll notice that some checks have run against your infrastructure. And obviously I've staged a few here, so we had something interesting to look at. What we try to do, again, using a consistent color theme that you'll notice throughout PMM, red is bad, orange says pay attention to, and blue is, hey, FYI. So we put this right here in front of you so that you've got immediately actionable information. There's at least two things that I have got to pay attention to. And by clicking on that panel, that's going to take you right to that centralized dashboard of checks. And again, giving you that information consistently, we see that we've got one critical, one trivial item here, one trivial item for the RDS at MySQL, and then the same 1-in-1 for our Percona Server 8 instance. What we wanted to do is start off small. You are looking at some development checks, so these are not what's all the way in production. In production, this is as much as you would see. I know the first thing that draws people's attention is, oh my gosh, you're exposing the username of who has a blank password. This is something that I've been playing with on my own. When I installed it on my home lab, I just for the heck of it decided to run against my system, and it came back with a blank password, and I wasn't expecting that. And so when I went and debugged it, I realized that there was an account I had created for a service I was tinkering with years ago, wasn't working, and I gave up on it, and I never actually removed the database instance. So it worked. At that point, I wanted to know what that user was. But again, that's not what's in production right now. While we're at it, if you want to leave a comment, it would be great to hear your input on whether or not you think seeing this in the live system is worthwhile, especially if I tell you that access to this information is limited to PMM admins only. So if your account was created in Grafana as an editor or a viewer, you will not be able to access this information, only your PMM admins. So the other thing that you're going to notice is we call this trivial. So I mentioned earlier about the telemetry service. Well, at this point, this is sort of a dumb compare. We look at the version of MySQL that you're currently running, and the security check actually downloads whatever the latest available version of your minor release is. We honestly don't know if there's anything noteworthy that would require you to upgrade or not. So at this point, this check is merely trivial. It's informational. Hey, you might want to investigate this. But as we continue to enhance the service, we'll be able to take your MySQL version, compare it to the CVE database, and actually make a recommendation based on the level of risk that you're at given the version that you're running. If we find that you have a CVE with a very high index on it, or that maybe upgrading to the most current version would resolve 20 or 30 CVEs. Obviously, the importance of that check we would elevate to draw your attention to it and get you to take action. So while we're at it, Daniel, did you want to go ahead and add those systems for me?
Yeah, that's done.
Awesome. So what Daniel's gone ahead and done is he went and added 3 more systems. And I only wanted to show this so that you can see the additional checks that we're creating. And again, a lot of these are in development. What you saw on the last screen is really all that's in production right now. But you'll notice we've got a lot more stuff going on here. Let's go back into our dashboard and take a peek at what's going on behind the scenes. So some of the checks that are in development right now is for our Postgres servers. We want to call out that you might have users you did not intend to have the super user role for Postgres. I think I heard Daniel mention this earlier in his talk about MySQL anonymous user checks, basically users with a blank username. We're trying to make this as proactive as we can. And again, putting the information in front of the end user so that they resolve issues with that goal of keeping you off the front page of the internet because your system was hacked. So that's basically the nickel tour of the PMM tool. We've got a lot of stuff still to come. This is our first release. We wanted to get it out there. We want to start getting feedback, show it off to the world. As you can see, there's probably a dozen checks. Some of them are actually not showing up because the systems aren't vulnerable to them. But we'll be releasing more and more of these over time. So hopefully there's a steady stream of it. But let's flip back over to our presentation here so that we can talk a little bit about where we go from here. The biggest thing for us is we want smarter checks and more of them. Right now, like I said, it's very informational. And again, it's going off the lowest level of information. So we don't actually know if there's a problem with your version of Postgres. All we know is it's not the current version. We also realize that alerting isn't enough. One of our goals for the Percona monitoring and management tool is to actually allow you to resolve some of this stuff. Now, obviously, we're still working out exactly how we want to do that. If I skip, it's not on this side, I thought it was on this slide. One of the things that we're taking very seriously is not resolving security issues by creating bigger ones. So a big piece of what we've done is lay the foundation for a secure environment. Meaning, we don't want to create an environment where you're subject to man-in-the-middle attacks or SQL injection or things like that. So a lot of our energy is going into hardening that aspect of it. But over time, the goal is to allow you to resolve those blank passwords, disable those anonymous users, perhaps remove super user account. And obviously we're going to do this the right way. It's not proxied credentials. The person who's actually carrying out the action would have to know the credentials to perform that. We're not just going to let any PMM admin start making changes to your systems. But the other thing is usability improvements. This is high on our list. So the table that you saw is a very basic table layout, but we've got sorting of items, making sure that you've got all listings, that you can go back in time, turning checks on and off, snoozing alerts, just a whole myriad of user-friendly enhancements that we want to make. I mentioned that right now the checks only run on a 24-hour basis. Customizable frequency is very high on our priority list. It's actually one of the next items we'll be working on. And that's going to allow you to increase the frequency of checks, as well as we want you to be able to customize individual checks to run more often than not. Maybe you only want a version check done once a day with a CVE scan once a day or once a week, but you want the blank user password to fire every hour on the hour. The custom checks in the developer guide, again, we're putting a lot of energy into making sure we do this correctly. We don't want to create another hole and close one hole and open 2 more. So allowing you to create your own checks without exposing your systems to increased vulnerability is something that we take very, very seriously. But once we get the basic engine and details worked out around creating custom checks and finalize the developer guide, it's a Python-based language. I was able to pick it up in just a matter of moments, and I'm not very smart. So we think we've made this pretty easy for everybody. Lastly, you'll notice third-party integrations is something big on our list, and that's allowing you to integrate this with Alert Manager, Slack, PagerDuty, so that, again, we want this information to be actionable immediately. We don't want you to find out that a system was, has a blank password, and you find out about it 24 hours later. That's something that you probably want to close immediately. So that's sort of the short list. I mean, there's a lot more we can do. Like I said, the sky's the limit. We've got a lot of aspirations, but just so that you know that there will be continued development in this. and we'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, I would like to add that there's one thing that will be beneficial for both the users and Percona, and is that new checks are independently of the PMM version that you're running. That's the whole intention in the future. So if you have PMM 2.6 and beyond, you always have the available delayed checks. And why is this beneficial for both parties? Because for the users, they don't have to perform an upgrade. That's probably not a task that are planning to do often. And also it's beneficial for Percona because we can push new checks ASAP as soon as possible, and it will be available for everyone that it has a PMM version that has the security threat tool and it's enabled. It will be available without the need of upgrading the PMM server version.
Yeah, great point. That was one of the first issues that we set out to tackle, was making sure that to get one new check, you didn't have to do a full PMM server upgrade and a PMM client upgrade. We'll be versioning that as we go forward. So if you're running an older version of PMM server, we will have checks that will check their compatibility with that version, because obviously as we enhance the actions that we can take, we need to keep some sort of synchronization between the two. But yeah, great point, Daniel. Thanks for bringing that up. So at this point, I guess we have open it up for questions. Tim, did any come in on the line?
Yeah, we have one question coming in. Are the checks going to be extended to the operating system as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the short answer is yes. We will open this up so that you can do some basic checking against your operating system. The complexity gets wild, right? So I just want to temper expectations and say that for right now, we're focused on SQL-based checks. Basically, we're limiting it to select and show verbs, or the Mongo equivalent, check version, so that we don't overshoot and do something silly. But then ultimately, we do plan on adding basic system level checks, so that you might be able to even extend our CVE system not just to the database server, but also the system that it's running on, but down the road.
Okay, I have a question here. I'm not sure I understand. It said, what additional privileges will you need for PMM?
So we didn't have to grant any privileges beyond what the normal PMM user gets for using the exporters as it is. So I have a very generic user for our RDS instance. Obviously, it was able to pull the version information, and it was allowed to do a basic select against the MySQL users table. That's basically it. It's just select at this point. We're not making any change. We don't intend to make change. So the PMM user that's polling for information is not going to be the same one that would actually change it. So when it comes time to carrying out actions, you're going to have to provide your own credentials. That way we know the person carrying out the action has permission to do it. We don't want to mediate that as Percona.
Very good. And one final question, how often can people expect new checks to be available?
Well, the beauty part about doing this as a cloud service is we are pushing our team to go to more of a continuous deploy model. Now, we haven't got there yet, so it's not going to be every hour on the hour. But right now we're targeting bi-weekly releases. So every other Sunday night or Monday night, we'll push out checks. We'll be updating the cloud service. So we should be able to get them out fairly quickly. We've got a pretty healthy list of them right now that are in the development process, making sure they go through their QA paces. We've got a great security guy overseas in England who loves to break things. So everything passes through him. Make sure that we don't do select stars or things like that would get us in trouble. We're typing it down or scoping it down to as little information as humanly possible to answer the question we're trying to answer. So, let's say bi-weekly for right now. But again, with an objective of getting the continuous deploy, we may be releasing them daily.
Very good. That's all the questions I see coming in. Thank you very much for your time, guys. I really appreciate it. Good talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Bye.
Bye-bye.